For our first interview, I'm really glad to have someone who I call a colleague and also a friend. He's been writing for the San Francisco Chronicle longer than I care to admit. He's been on my Rolodex. He is the person that tells us what is good design or what isn't good design. He reports on the cityscape. Well, for the last few weeks, he has been doing double duty as our COVID-19 reporter. So please welcome my colleague, John King of the San Francisco Chronicle.
In journalism these days, and I'm no exception.
John, I don't know if you recall, but when the late great Herb Caen had his funeral at Grace Cathedral, I happened to be helping them with PR and communications. And after the service, I came out, and I'd always been a little afraid of you. You were considered kind of a stern journalist, and you were standing there. And I remember you looked out over San Francisco from the stairs atop Grace Cathedral, and you opened your hands and you said, looking at these over 2,000 people at Herb's funeral, all this for a journalist. Did you ever think that journalism would be as important as it is now? I mean, this is arguably, well, it isn't arguably, it's the biggest story since World War II and maybe before.
Yeah, it is striking. I mean, journalism is going through a real fascinating moment right now. It's a real hard one for a lot of people who are in the profession I'm in. But you have this thing where digital traffic is up astounding to an astounding extent. And you see this in just the Chronicle numbers for sfchronicle.com have really shot forward. Every news site has that because people really want to know, and no matter how politicized the debate over journalism has become, you definitely see right now this sense that where can I go just to get information, just to get facts? And where can I go to get local information that's not going through the whole battle in Washington, D.C. or something like that? And so you see this in San Francisco, you see this in every big city where newspapers are having daily traffic. The Chronicle's having its digital subscriptions go up a huge extent, which is great. We appreciate that. I get the paper delivered at home still, and I prefer that because it's a nice change to all the digital information we're getting right now. But it's tricky because meanwhile, the number of ads being bought is really going down because so many businesses are having problems. So it's a real interesting time. The SF Symphony, which always has ads in the Chronicle, you're not going to buy an ad if you're not doing any performances for the next 6 weeks. So it's an interesting time. People really are turning to journalism, and that's so appreciated. We all realize, a lot of what I do is architecture criticism. People right now aren't going to be worrying about how the mullions look on a new building. They want to know what happened at the City Hall press briefing the day before. So we're all being redeployed and providing people what they need at this point in the nation's history, in the city's history, in your own personal history.
Yeah, it's interesting, John. The other day I was speaking with Audrey Cooper, the executive editor of the Chronicle, and she made the comment that local newspapers were having a real hard time up until COVID-19. And as you said, advertising wise, they are, but now people are really looking to the local hometown papers wherever they are, San Francisco, Duluth, Austin, to really get the news, because the news and the figures for each city, each area are different and so important. We can't get the news about COVID-19 just by watching CNN or MSNBC or whatever network you watch.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you look at the Bay Area and the Chronicle has lists of where you can get takeout food. We have things about local bike shops having strains, local car repair shops having strains, every strain under the sun. And, at some point people get tired of, what Trump said at the press briefing, what Democrats said about what Trump said at the press briefing. You kind of want to know how your life is playing out. You want to know about the streets being closed in the Bay, San Francisco and Oakland, like slowing down streets to through traffic. I'm doing a piece that'll be in tomorrow's paper. Berkeley's basically had that for 45 or 50 years, a variation of that with traffic diverters. And it's a particular aspect I can bring to the mix because I know the Bay Area, I know the landscape. That's what the Chronicle, bless it, has been paying me to write about for a long time. And you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that from CNN. And if you read about it in the New York Times or something, it's going to be a national article that's framed with little examples from 9 or 10 different cities.
Right.
So it gets, I think people, I mean, there's an old dictum, news is what makes people talk. Beyond that, it's news is what is relevant to your life. And I think right now, more than any time we can remember, that second dictum is what's driving people's attention, is how does this thing going on affects me? Exactly how does it work? What's at stake for me and for the people I know where we live? And that's what journalism does.
Right. John, I've seen a few articles recently talking about the post-COVID world. What is it going to look like? What are cities going to look like? Are we going to be more sustainable? How are designs going to be impacted? How are public spaces going to be impacted? I mean, this has been your beat, as it were, for a long time. Putting your finger in the wind and using the crystal ball, how do you see the cityscape of San Francisco, specifically in the Bay Area, changing after we all come out?
It'd be interesting. I think the importance of the public realm of parks and plazas and streets and sidewalks is being made as vividly as it could possibly be made right now. I mean, I was talking with an architect earlier people are really appreciating the chance to be outside. At the same time, so I think there's a lot on that. I'm not writing about the public realm right now because I think I just want to chew on it a bit more for myself. I'm working on a piece on how designs might change. And, it really is too early to even put your finger up in the wind, except we're all trapped at home wondering that ourselves, unless, we're working in the grocery store or working in the hospital or something like that. But it is real interesting because, if the shelter in place orders are lifted on May 3rd or May 10th or May 17th, I'm not going to go want to sit in the movie theater with strangers on either side of me, in front of me, and in back of me. It's just, we've been for weeks, we've been told that isn't how we take care of ourselves. And that's not going to go away instantly. So it's hard to say. I think what you'll really see is a whole new set of arguments about the genuine importance of public space to the health of the city. That definitely you'll see.
Yeah. John, we've only got about 3-4 more minutes left in this interview, and there's 2 questions I want to ask you. The first one is, when you've been out doing reporting about COVID-19, what's the best and the worst behavior you've seen in some of our fellow citizens out there?
I had pretty much been the classic working from home reporter, so I haven't been out much at all. I mean, the day after shelter in place was put into place, I went out and went to several neighborhoods and looked around. And it was interesting. At that time, it was this weird novelty. So it was not a whole lot of people behaving badly, certainly. And what I have seen since then is what's filtered through the media. And, inevitably you kind of there's this great urge to shame other people or other generations or whatever. But what I've seen, and this isn't as a journalist, this is as someone who lives in Berkeley and likes to walk around, who was liking to bicycle around until I rode over a nail. I feel like the social distancing is getting farther and farther apart, whereas in mid-March it was, gee, we don't want to get more than 6 feet close to somebody. Now it's like, oh, I see someone 2 houses away. Should I go into the street? And then they've already gone into the street. So the sidewalk's yours.
Right.
And so it's why some of the fight are not fights, but some of the calls for slow streets in residential neighborhoods, there are so few cars out, and it seems like I have not seen. I mean, I've been on the Bay Bridge. I went in Sunday for supplies to the paper, and I took a great photograph from my dashboard, which I shouldn't do with my phone, and I was probably going 70 miles an hour with cars passing me on both sides. So no one should drive 100 miles an hour, but it is very easy to drive fast these days if you don't pay attention. Um, but in terms of like kind of walking around, it just I don't see. I feel like in residential settings, drivers are appreciating there's a different etiquette right now, and I hope some of that sticks.
So,
And I hope
John, last
everyone starts
question.
dressing at home as sharply as you do.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, this is the first tie I've had on in 2 months, so don't get too excited.
Looks
Last
good.
question, John. Last question in a few seconds, 30 seconds. Tell me what you are most looking forward to when we are finally allowed to go outside again. What does the quote unquote new normal look like for John King?
Professionally, what I'm most looking forward to is I like to write about buildings. I'm an architecture critic. And it's frustrating because you see something getting built and it just goes up and up and up. And even when it's all the way up, it's not finished on the inside. And it's funny, there are a number of buildings for the last 6 months I've been wanting to write about, but they're not done yet. So I can't really write about them critically because I need to go into them, I need to examine them. So I'm actually looking forward to getting back and actually being able to write critically about some of these big new buildings that are housing, that have affordable housing in them. And they weren't done in January and they weren't done in February, but they'll be done in May or June. And so I can go back and catch up with them.
Great. Thank you, John. The first round of drinks, when we're able to have it side by side at the House of Shields, that's on me.